Two men in fine traveling cloaks, the papal seal stitched into their collars, approach the Franciscan friary. Road dust still clings to their boots. They have come in search of a man named Bonaventure, and they carry with them a very important delivery. They dismount, tie off their horses, and knock on the heavy wooden door. The door opens, and they're ushered inside toward the man they seek. These are no ordinary visitors. They are close confidants of the Pope, envoys sent to deliver the highest honor the Church can bestow on a man who is not already wearing the papal ring. They carry a sealed letter, a ring, and a wide-brimmed red hat known as a galero, the mark of a cardinal. Bonaventure has just been named one of the Pope's 20 closest advisors on earth. The envoys announce themselves. They have come on official business, personally sent by Pope Gregory X, to bestow upon him the red galero. He is to become a prince of the Church, one of the most honored men in Christendom. Bonaventure does not look up. His hands stay in the water, working over a stack of dishes. What he says next will demonstrate the depth of his humility and leave the envoys speechless. Bagno Reggio, Italy, 1225. A young boy named Giovanni is gravely ill. His parents fear he will not survive the night. A fever has taken hold of him, one the physicians cannot break. He drifts in and out of consciousness, his small body burning. The family tries everything they know. Finally, out of desperation, they carry him to a well-known holy man passing through the region, a man already gaining a reputation for healings, exorcisms, and for bearing the very wounds of Christ in his own flesh. The boy's parents beg him to pray for their dying son. He agrees. Soon after, the fever breaks. The boy lives. Upon hearing of the healing, the holy man exclaims, "O Bonaventure!" Oh, good fortune. Giovanni never forgets the words. In time, he makes them his very own name. We know him as Bonaventure. And later in life, he would give himself entirely to the Franciscan order, because the man who healed him that day was not just any holy man. He was St. Francis of Assisi. Bonaventure joined the Franciscans as a young man, was ordained a priest, and went on to study in Paris under some of the greatest theologians of his age. He rose quickly, first as a teacher, then as a writer whose work would shape Christian spirituality for centuries. But it was his devotion to the order itself that defined him. In 1257, at just 36 years old, he was elected Minister General of the entire Franciscan order, the man now responsible for holding together the very brotherhood that had once saved his life. He would lead it to the next 17 years, steering it through internal division and holding it to the vision of poverty and humility that Francis himself had set down. By the time the envoys arrive at his door, Bonaventure was no obscure friar. He was known across Europe, one of the greatest theologians, a teacher who had lectured alongside Thomas Aquinas in Paris, a leader who had already turned down the Archbishopric of York rather than leave his order. Even popes sought his counsel, and now Gregory X wanted him still closer. The envoys finished their announcement. Without hesitation, without fanfare, Bonaventure told them to hang the red galero on a tree branch outside. He would collect it once his chores were done. He wasn't being difficult, he wasn't performing humility for an audience. He meant it plainly. To Bonaventure, washing dishes done for the love of God and neighbor was worth more than any title Rome could offer. He had just been handed the highest recognition the Church could give a man outside the papacy itself, and he went back to the sink. Bonaventure deeply understood something most men spend their lives trying to learn, that greatness before God has nothing to do with rank and everything to do with the heart behind the smallest task. One day, Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest theologians the Church has ever known, and a close friend of Bonaventure's, asked to see the books from which Bonaventure had drawn such profound wisdom. By then, Aquinas had become the most celebrated scholar in Europe. Popes trusted him with the Church's hardest theological questions, and his writings would go on to shape Catholic thought for centuries. His mind was so extraordinary that it could dictate several different works to multiple scribes at once, moving between them without losing his place. His own teacher, St. Albert the Great, had once defended the quiet young friar by declaring, "You call him the dumb ox." But his bellowing and doctrine will one day resound throughout the whole world. He was right. Aquinas would later be declared a doctor of the Church, remembered as the angelic doctor. And yet even Aquinas wanted to know the source of Bonaventure's wisdom. Bonaventure could have led him through shelves of treasured manuscripts. He could have spoken of years of study of renowned teachers and of countless volumes he had mastered. He did none of it. Instead, he led Aquinas quietly to his small, austere room. There were no towering shelves, no hidden library, no secret collection of ancient texts. Bonaventure simply raised his hand and pointed to the plain wooden crucifix on the wall. To Bonaventure, theology was never just an intellectual pursuit. Knowledge alone could fill the mind, but only Christ could transform the soul. The deepest truths of God were not found in books, but in contemplating the crucified Lord. He put it simply, if you learn everything except Christ, you learn nothing. If you learn nothing except Christ, you learn everything. Bonaventure would go on to be named a doctor of the Church, remembered as the seraphic doctor, a title given for the burning, almost angelic love of God that ran through everything he wrote. But nothing in his life would demand more of him than what came next, the Second Council of Lyon. Pope Gregory X had not made Bonaventure a cardinal simply to honor him. The Church was preparing to attempt something that had failed for over 2 centuries, healing the divide between the Eastern and Western Church. Gregory needed his wisest men in the room, and Bonaventure was one of them. Everything Bonaventure had studied, everything he had built, everything he had given to the order and to the Church was poured into that council. He worked through the sessions, he advised, he preached before the assembled bishops of Christendom. And when the reunion was announced, for one brief moment, the Church was whole again. Then, 2 days before the council ended, Bonaventure died. He had given the council everything he had, his intellect, his years of learning, his love, and there was nothing left to give. Even at the height of his power, Bonaventure never let his position make him proud. He used it the same way he used everything else, to bring people together. First within his own fractured order, then in his final act on earth between East and West. In the end, he gave everything he had and everything he was for God. Even the dishes were never beneath him, because throughout his life, Bonaventure never stopped looking toward the same place he had once pointed Thomas Aquinas, a simple wooden crucifix.